Today we are going to discuss a topic that a lot of English learners keep asking about. How can you stop translating everything in your mind and how can you begin to think directly in English? Hello everyone, this is Asim and welcome back. Perhaps you already understand English quite well. You are familiar with grammar rules and you have learned plenty of vocabulary too. However, when it comes to speaking, things suddenly slow down. You find yourself converting each sentences from your native language into the English. Does this situation feel similar to you? In this video, I want to clarify what thinking in English actually involves, what modern research tells about it, and most importantly, how you can gradually train your brain to do it step by step. I will also share my personal journey of learning a second language to fluency and explain what truly works for me. So, what does it really mean to think in English? In simple terms, it means your brain can quickly and naturally react to English words and phrases without having to search for them every single time. It's all about the access. When you translate in your head, your brain performs two separate tasks. First, you create idea in your own language, then you try to find English equivalent. That extra step consumes the time, which is why speaking often feels slow and challenging. Thinking in English reduces that extra effort. This is exactly where research helps us understand what's going on. A recent study from 2024 examined what makes people fluent in a second language. The study has a long technical title which I'll mention for anyone interested in exploring it further. The researchers focused on something known as cognitive fluency. Let me simplify that. They looked at how fast the brain can recognize and retrieve words in a second language. Here is what they discovered. Some learners mainly depend on controlled processing. This means their brain slows down to search for words and carefully check each choice. Other learners demonstrate more automatic processing. Their brain recognizes and retrieves words quickly with much less effort. The key finding was this: learners with more automatic access to words spoke faster and paused less often. Importantly, the study did not claim that these speakers were smarter or had a better grammar knowledge. Instead, it showed that their brain was simply better trained to access English rapidly. So, when we talk about thinking in English, we are really talking about how efficiently your brain can find words without stopping to calculate every step. Now, why does translation slow you down? Translation itself is not a bad. In fact, it's completely normal and very helpful at the beginning. But if it becomes your main way of speaking, it creates difficulties. Research explains why it feels exhausting. Controlled processing requires more mental energy. That's why your speech might be accurate, yet slow, hesitant, and unnatural. Fluency improves when your brain doesn't need to pause and check each step. When I was learning my second language, I translated everything in the beginning. Every idea, every sentence. I could communicate, but it felt heavy, and I was always a step behind in conversation. What made the difference for me was repetition and exposure, especially the amount of time I spent listening to the language. I began hearing the same phrases repeatedly instead of building the sentences word by word. I started using ready made patterns. Gradually, my brain adapted. This didn't happen because I forced myself to think in language, but because I use it regularly and naturally. So, how can you train your brain to think in English? Let's move to some practical strategies you can apply. First, focus on collocations. Your brain doesn't work well with isolated vocabulary lists. It prefers patterns that are predictable. A collocation is a natural combination of words. For example, we say heavy rain, not big rain, because that sounds unnatural. Words like heavy and rain commonly appear together. When you learn phrases such as make a decision, heavy rain, or take responsibility, your brain begins to expect the next word. This reduces effort and increases speed in recalling the language, exactly what fluent speakers do well. You can even practice with list of common collocations to strengthen this skill. Next, use shadowing. Shadowing means listening to speech and immediately repeating it out loud. There's no translation or detailed thinking involved, just quick reactions. This was one of the main techniques I used to become fluent. It trains your brain to shift from controlled processing to automatic processing, which is essential for thinking in English. Also, try to speak as much as possible. When you practice with partner or alone, daily speaking is extremely valuable. Even if you make mistakes, speaking forces your brain to find words more quickly. Faster retrieval is exactly what builds fluency and supports thinking in English directly. Another helpful method is using English stories as an input. You don't need to understand every single word. In fact, understand around 60 to 70% is enough. This challenges your brain to guess meaning, use context, and fill in the missing information. That's how your brain starts connecting ideas directly with English instead of relying on translation. It's important to expose yourself to English every day. Set realistic expectation. Thinking in English doesn't happen instantly. It develops gradually sometimes. Some days you'll translate and other days you won't. That's completely normal. The aim is not perfection, but the effort, reduce effort, and smoother communication. So, thinking in English is not a myth. I know this is from my own experience of using a second language. Research also confirms that fluency grows when your brain becomes faster in assessing the words. If you train that speed through repetition, patterns, real life usage, and your brain will adapt. Eventually, you won't even notice the progress, you will simply speak naturally. Finally, if you found this helpful, consider subscribing so I can support your learning further. I will see you in the next video. Take care.